6th Duval City Council meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. And clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Budnicki.
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Here.
Councilmember McHenry.
Here.
Councilmember Remington.
Here.
Councilmember Hogue.
Here.
Councilmember Napland. Hello? Councilmember Napland? Oh, she's here. She was just on mute. Councilmember Langle. Sorry, I wasn't looking at my screen.
Here.
Okay. And if you give me one moment, I will bring up the flag for this flag salute. My apologies.
If you would all please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Moving to additions or corrections. Under consent agenda, please add payroll for March 20th. 2021 in the amount of $147,049.28. Payroll for April 5th, 2021 in the amount of $115,930.53. And claims for March 17th, 2021 through April 6th, 2021 in the amount of $317,078.82. Are there any council members that would like to speak this evening? So Councilmember McHenry. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Do we have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Mike Remington, so moved.
Second, Councilmember Hogue.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Remington and a second by Councilmember Hogue to approve this evening's agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we do have items on the consent agenda. The FEMA grant agreement that has not had 3 touch. This is a 1 touch. Next on the agenda is to have a motion to suspend council procedures in section 5.6, requiring additional review and finalize all items within the consent agenda. Councilmember Lingle.
I make a motion to include the FEMA grant and approve the items on the consent agenda.
So
Did I do that right?
we need a motion to suspend your rules.
Suspend the rules. That's right. We have to suspend the rules first. Suspend the rules so we can do those items.
Yes.
Mike Remington, second.
Great. We have a motion by Councilmember Lingle and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Remington to suspend the rules and approve the FEMA grant in the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, do we have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda? Councilmember Lingle.
Make a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda.
And I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Lingle and a second by Councilmember Schaefer to approve this evening's consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, moving on to comments from the audience. First of all, Clerk Wyckoff, did anyone submit comments via email or mail?
They did not, and I've allowed our 2 prior attendees to speak if they so choose.
All right, excellent. So the clerk has promoted the attendees of the meeting to panelists. And if you would like to speak to any topic this evening, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And all you need to do is unmute yourself and provide your name, and you have your 3-minute time limit. I'm not seeing any, so I'll just give it one more second just in case there's some technical trouble on somebody's end. All right, okay. Well, we'll move on to scheduled items. First up is the mayor's report. We do have two proclamations tonight, one of which was not on the agenda, was a later request after the agenda was publicized for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So I will go ahead and read that into the record. Whereas in Washington state, 45% of women and 22% of men report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And whereas in King County, 7,152 adults and children receive specialized assistance from organizations with programming for sexual assault victims in 2020. And whereas rape is among the most underreported crimes for reasons that include victims' fear of being disbelieved or further traumatized within systems designed to support them, additional barriers such as language, immigration status, gender bias, and systemic racism further oppress and silence victims. And whereas individual and community impacts of sexual violence are rooted in and compounded by racial, gender, sexual orientation, and other forms of oppression. Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people living in poverty, LGBTQ people, elders, people with disabilities, and other people targeted by oppression are affected by sexual violence in significant and complex ways. And whereas statewide, 29% of the survivors who were supported by a community sexual assault organization identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color in 2019. Of those identifying ethnicity, 21% identified as Latinx, Hispanics. And whereas King County is home to many organizations that provide culturally and linguistically specific services for survivors from various racial, ethnic, faith, and cultural communities, survivors who are immigrants and refugees, survivors who are LGBTQ, and survivors with disabilities. These culturally specific services are critical to effectively respond to the specific needs and barriers many survivors face. And whereas negative impacts of sexual violence trauma on women, men, children, and youth include fear, concern for safety, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, injury, and missed work or school. And whereas working together as a community, we can alleviate the trauma of sexual violence by ensuring supportive resources are available to all survivors while standing up to harmful attitudes and behaviors that contribute to sexual assault. Now, therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, join advocates and communities throughout King County in taking action to prevent sexual violence by standing with survivors and proclaiming April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Together, we commit to a safer future for all children, young people, adults, and families in our community. The second one is, I have to get to the right page here, is for Hope Link Day. And I'll go ahead and read that into the record as well. Whereas Hope Link began in Bothell, Washington in April 1971, when a group of laid off workers responded to a devastating economic downturn by banding together to help their neighbors find jobs. And whereas in October 1971, the group received a grant, took on the name North Shore Multi-Service Center, moved to Woodinville and opened a food bank and also began offering rides. And whereas by 1984, the organization had expanded to cover most of East King County, opening centers in Kirkland, Snoqualmie Valley, Bellevue, and Redmond to provide food and other emergency assistance, while also opening the first emergency shelter in North and East King County. And whereas in 1990, Hope Link became the first Medicaid transportation brokerage serving King County, and within 3 years had expanded to serve more than 25,000 people every year. And whereas the organization officially took on the name Hope Link in 2000, and whereas Hope Link expanded into North King County in 2006, opening its first emergency service center in Shoreline, and whereas Hope Link's first transportation hub opened in Kent in 2010, and 7 years later grew into a new and expanded facility in the same city, and whereas Hope Link currently serves 65,000 people every year, providing a network of services through 9 programs that help families, children, seniors, and people with disabilities gain stability and, when possible, exit poverty, as well as directs transportation services in King and Snohomish counties. And whereas Hope Link's vision of a community free of poverty includes a commitment to addressing systemic racism and the inequities and circumstances that drive poverty. And whereas for 50 years, HopeLink has served as not only a vital resource in our community, but a beacon of hope for our neighbors who are experiencing poverty and homelessness. Now, therefore, we, the mayors of Bellevue, Bothell, Carnation, Duval, Issaquah, Kenmore, Kent, Kirkland, Lake Forest Park, Mercer Island, North Bend, Redmond, Renton, Sammamish, Seattle, Shoreline, Skykomish, Snoqualmie, and Woodinville jointly proclaim April 21st, 2021 as HopeLink Day and invite the community to celebrate the organization we are proud to call our own as it continues to execute the mission of helping people and changing the lives for the better in our community. All right. And so with that, moving on, and I will say for folks that are unaware, HopeLink has hired a new executive director. She comes from the Midwest. It happens to be, ironically enough, she happens to work with, or previously worked with a friend of mine locally. And I've heard rave reviews. So it'll be sad that Lauren retired down to Oregon, but really exciting that they've got a very qualified director coming in, and exciting to see what they might do to continue to expand their services and program. So moving on to my general report, I sent out an email to council, I think it was over the weekend or on Friday. The Senate has passed their capital budget, which does contain $107,000 for the police department renovation. It's not in the House budget, so they're working on reconciliation. So the next steps will be for me to contact our legislators tomorrow and just make sure that that when the two budgets are reconciled, that stays in. I think the chances are good because Representative Goodman sponsored that request from the House side. And sometimes it takes just a little extra nudge to make sure it ends up in both budgets. And I think we're also lucky and fortunate that all of our legislative members are in senior positions of leadership. So that helps out as well. So I think there's a pretty good chance we'll be able to get that money in. The Association of Washington Cities Legislative Board of Directors Legislative Committee met last week. There hasn't been much to discuss this session, surprisingly. As Councilmember Langlow and I discussed at lunch yesterday, there's a bunch of bills going through that are not great for us, but they're freight trains that there's nothing we can do to stop them. And so the Legislative Committee, the only thing that we addressed was discussing where cities are at on the Blake decision, which for those that are unaware, it's the Supreme Court decision that invalidated one of our state laws for drug possession. It's simply a one-word fix in state law, but it caught everyone off guard and they're scrambling to try and fix it because as of right now, it is currently legal based on that decision to possess hard drugs up to a certain amount. So our Senator Dingra has the primary vehicle to address that issue. I suspect that a big part of this is going to be supporting funding for diversion and making sure that people have access to services. Because as we all know, drug abuse often comes with coexisting mental health issues, and making sure that people have access to appropriate treatment is one of the most important pathways to getting them towards recovery and living more normal lives. So there are some concerns with the legislation that's been drafted. I haven't reviewed the most recent version, but that is what the AWC group was discussing and continues to monitor. And it's come up in pretty much every other meeting, regional meeting we've had in the last week. We also had the Snoqualmie Valley Mayor's meeting this morning. Again, a lot of the discussion there actually boiled down to CDBG formula funding in the East County, as well as what we're hoping to do with our federal funds from the ARPA bill. We had our Strong Mayors meeting last week for Sound Cities. Again, most of the conversation surrounded the Blake decision. And then we had, I don't know if anyone on council attended, the SCA lunch with the board with Federal Way Mayor Jim Farrell and Tukwila Councilmember Deshaun Quinn. I've known Councilmember Quinn for probably 12 to 15 years. So I already knew him pretty well, but definitely got to learn some interesting facts about him and got to see Mayor Farrell in a new light. And it was really great to be able to have that time with the group and the moderated session with Deanna Dawson and learn more about them. So if you guys haven't attended them, I do encourage you to, because it provides an open door. And even though it's a virtual session, there's a connection there that that we haven't seen in other meetings. I myself and Mayor Jan Molinaro of Enumclaw will be the whatever you want to call us, the panelist for the next lunch with the board in a couple of weeks. We also had meetings organized by the city of Monroe with state legislators regarding 522. There is $90 million of funding in the state transportation budget for the widening of 522, but it does not include the Paradise Lake interchange. This is still a huge win. So we're hoping to see that get across the finish line. If we don't get our 203 money this year, this is a big win regardless, because that project will significantly impact the issue of pass-through traffic in our community. We also, we have on the agenda this evening, the interim city administrator contract with Mr. Ryan Cotton. He has moved to Washington, got here last weekend weekend before last. And Lieutenant DeBach and I were able to have lunch with him, introduce him in person to some of our staff, and are, I think, really happy with the choice and selection. And I think that council's really going to enjoy having him here. He's got approximately 40 years background in city administration, a strong HR background, and he's also an adjunct college professor in government, as well as a vice president for a company called GovHR. Definitely an impressive candidate with a strong background, and I think he's going to be able to help us with a lot of really good work. We are also discussing internally how we start to reopen the city. It's time to start thinking about that, even though right now it looks like we might be rolling backwards. I think approximately 50% or a little bit more of our staff are now vaccinated. So that provides some safety and surety for folks. However, I'm sure that not everyone will. So there's going to need to be continued precautions as people make those personal decisions. And trying to figure out how and when the best time to open our buildings to the public is a real big topic. Recent CDC guidance just in the last couple of days says there is no need to sanitize areas after someone has been confirmed infected. So that reduces already the cleaning burden that the city has every time you have somebody exposed or come to a building sick. So that's definitely a helpful tool. Adding on to what Councilmember Schaefer discussed regarding the King County Public Health update with Patty Hayes, the numbers in King County are high. And I believe it was Monday, there were 600 new cases. The rolling average they're expecting within the next week to 2 weeks will exceed the governor's threshold for staying in phase 3. So they are strongly encouraging people to continue to follow public health guidelines, particularly those that are teenagers and young adults, because that is where the increase in cases is happening with the variant, according to public health. The other side of that, just to give a perspective of what's going on statewide, Pierce County has already passed that threshold. And so they are likely going to roll back to phase 3 if things don't turn around very quickly within the next week. And Whitman County in Eastern Washington has already met the threshold to roll back to phase 1. And Whitman County is where Washington State University is located. And so that just re-emphasizes the importance of making sure the teenagers and young adults in particular are following the public health guidelines. Again, we've got the 1.8 coming to us from the federal government. Haven't seen final guidelines on that yet, but just as a reminder, when that gets going, Councilmember Lingle and I, and if there's another council member or two that want to help, we will be looking at and bringing forth options for allocation and have that discussion with council and start developing a program for utilizing that funding over the next 3 years. I always miss something, so I don't know what I'm missing right now. I do know actually one other item. The city is looking at some cloud-based software to help with some of our policy processes and HR. At this point, it's really preliminary. Depending on the service, we may or may not need to go out for an RFQ. And then as far as going back to reopening again, when we reopen, we are going to be required to, even if we're meeting in person, live stream our videos and have access for public comment at the same time, which is going to be great. It's just pushing us ahead a little faster than we were prepared to. So we're starting to look at potential services for that. So I've been doing some digging and asking other cities what they're using. One of the key things that's come about with this too is a lot of these programs offer AI closed captioning services that are very accurate. So even if someone is not hard of hearing, I think that if we continue on past COVID with a live streaming with automatic closed captioning, that will have more participation in our meetings. Because for a lot of folks, they don't want to hear the noise, but they're happy to read the words as they scroll across the screen. So that's still a ways out, but just wanted to let folks know that we're thinking about that. That's one of the things on the plate that we have to do for reopening. But it also, I think, will have some big benefits for the long run. And I think that's all I have. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Langle?
Yeah, I got the AWC sign-on letter request today, and I tried to, I mentioned to you the other day that I've been trying to track what happened to the governor's original proposal on issuing transportation related.
Oh, yes.
And I tried to go through their link, and the link didn't work. And I've tried this before. Sometimes their links don't connect for some reason under AWC. So
do you want me to send you, just copy the letter and send it in an email? Would that be easy for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, yes, that would be helpful, but it would also be helpful if I could, in their letter, they reference that you can get their summaries.
Okay.
So I've been trying to track that particular piece of funding. And I was hoping that one of their summaries would define what happened to it. So because this is a perfect time to issue bonds for transportation. So, and then I think you mentioned to me that there was something that we previously were eligible for, but we weren't eligible for it potentially now when we had our discussion yesterday.
Yes,
that was. And so maybe you could share that with people, because I think that's kind of important.
It is. And thank you. There's always so much. You can never get it all in. So very, very appreciative, Councilmember Lingle. Steve and I did learn last week with the federal processes right now, they are changing daily. So based for the transportation and infrastructure bill at this point, the criteria now excludes the city of Duval. So we'll still look at submitting the member directed request, but not being able to submit in both places certainly reduces the chances of it getting funded. Councilmember Lingle and I talked quite a bit about really our best chance with the federal side is really to work on rule changes, building relationships and rule changes, because we're just that missing middle. We're not rural enough and we're too urban at the same time, which means that we don't qualify for most of the programs. So we'll continue to monitor that. The federal lobbyist RFQ has not gone out yet. I did have to focus on a few other things. And I appreciate the feedback that folks sent out. We will still send it out and review, because even if we choose ultimately not, if council chooses not to go that direction this year, I think we'll have good information for future discussions. And obviously it'll be a council decision, and based on what we get back, we'll make a recommendation from administration whether we still think it's a good idea to move forward or if we want to hold off 1 year. So I think did I get everything, Councilmember Lingle?
Yeah, I mean, I just it's annoying, but I know other council members have voiced this to me over time, and we've had it in council meetings, is we're this hybrid and we have the pressures of growth and few tools to mitigate it.
Yes.
And I just see that as horribly unfair. So if you look at GMA, there are references to we're supposed to have the money to deal with things like transportation and affordable housing. So they say we're going to have these tools, but then they don't give them to us.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that focusing on the rules change is pretty incredibly important right now.
Absolutely. And for folks that haven't read the AWC letter yet, it focuses on, public safety reform, transportation, and in particular funding, making sure that money stays in the budget for the unfunded mandates, what would be unfunded mandates for a lot of growth management legislation that's moving through right now. And those are some of the bills that are going to negatively impact us. But the freight trains were moving so strongly that we're not going to be able to stop it. There are good parts of the bills, but the unfunded mandate and the increased staff time is definitely a problem. Feel free to sign onto that letter. It's consistent with the AWC legislative agenda. It goes through the board of directors, et cetera. So the more people that want to sign on to that, the better. And since we've already, supported the AWC agenda, it's in line. And I don't feel the need for anybody to have a vote, but if you want to sign it, please do so. And if you did not get the email from AWC, let me know and I'm happy to forward it on. All right. If there are no further questions, Councilmember McHenry.
Thank you. So I have two things. First one, we're really long overdue for this, but the pandemic has certainly taken a toll on everyone, and I am no exception. So I finally took some time to just pick a date for a council chat. And I think it's appropriate at this time to go ahead and keep them virtual still, obviously. So what I have right now, and I will email everyone after this, so don't worry about writing it down if you don't have something handy, is Friday, April 23rd from 2 to 3 p.m. And for Councilmember Schaefer, because I think you're the only one who maybe hasn't been on since we started this. It's an idea I brought forward in 2019 when it started then. And I feel like we had one or two in person in the beginning of 2020 until schools closed. And then we had a couple virtual, and then we just decided to take a break because there was a lot going on. So I think we'll go ahead and give it a try virtually again, maybe by summer with more vaccinations and things changing. Hopefully we could maybe have some socially distant in-person opportunities with the nice weather, but we'll see. So basically we can have up to 3 council members at each council chat. And I'm happy to set them up and step off if 3 other people want. So I will email everyone later, like I said, and you can just reply only to me if you're interested in attending. And then the second thing is, as you know, I think for quite some time, I've served on the King Conservation District Advisory Committee via SCA. And they shared a couple things coming up, which are really interesting. So for those who don't know, they're a really valuable resource. They have a ton of programs for landowners, and they're not a regulatory agency. So it really builds that trust with landowners to get good advice and not worry about someone saying, hey, you can't have this here. They're really about trying to educate landowners and improve the environment. So there's some educational online events. One is What's the Scoop on Loop? It's a talk about soil and biosolids. There's Beautify and Care for Your Stream or Lakeside property in an environmentally friendly way. Managing wildfire risk to your Western Washington home, and that's for residents that live on wooded properties. And also a program called Where the Water Begins for marine shoreline residents. And they have these all posted on their website. I shared this with our clerk. I can also email this out after because there are some great links. And of course, if you can't attend these live, they do record them and they have a YouTube channel. So again, just want to share some of the great programs they have. We have a big diversity of landowners and the types of land. Some live along rivers and in the woods, urban wooded, rural wooded. So lots of great opportunities there to get some free resources from them. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember, and please feel free to send it to Mr. Tozer as well, and he can choose which things to post online for that.
Will do.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, this question for Councilmember McHenry. The purpose of the three-person chats, just an informal get-together to basically speak what's on your mind, your current hot topics or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, it really was just to, because right now what we have is well, even when we're not virtual, is people can come to a city council meeting and have 3 minutes to say something that's on their mind, but we don't have time on our agenda or schedule to necessarily be able to respond. There's not really a back and forth. So this is an opportunity for people to just casually meet with us, tell us a comment, ask questions. And I mean, we didn't fully develop it out. We could certainly look at hosting certain topics on certain days to try and solicit more participation from, you know, the community. But for right now, I think it's good to keep it in general. And we've had some that are super busy and well attended, and some not so much. I try to vary the dates, times a day, I mean, everything, and locations to try and get as much participation as possible. Of course, right now with it being virtually, it's its own challenge, but we'll give it a go again and see how it goes.
Yeah, no, terrific idea. Thanks. And I'll definitely be interested. So I'll watch for your email. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. If there are no further questions for Councilmember McHenry, we'll go ahead and move on to council committee reports. First up is Finance and Administration. Chair Remington, do you have anything to report?
I'll be real brief. We're a bit behind where we had hoped to be. Wanted to complete our work by the end of March, but we wanted to get procurement policy right versus hurrying it through. We do have a 48-page draft we've been working on. We're still working on language. And when we have that ready for your review, we'll send it to all council members and set up a working session where we can all work together and try to get it finalized. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for Chair Remington? Seeing none, we will move on to public safety with Chair Rudnicki.
Okay, so we did meet and we covered 3 topics. The IFIT KC community representative advertising was discussed, and the chief's message and additional information is going to go out to the community in the April utility billing and posted on the PD Facebook page and city website. And then we also discussed upcoming dates for virtual information sessions with Acting Chief DeBach, open application period, virtual interviews, and final selection of the community representatives. And council member, myself, McHenry, and Schaefer, we all requested invitations to the virtual information session with Acting Chief DeBach. We also then discussed police recruitment, hiring update. So oral boards were done with 2 lateral candidates on March 3rd, 2021. Top lateral candidate withdrew from process recently, was replaced with an entry-level candidate. Both entry-level candidates received conditional offers of employment. And now we're into the next phase of screening, and so that one of them was disqualified. If all goes well, the entry-level candidate will begin academy training in May. And we have opened up recruitment phase for lateral candidates and hope to have oral boards within 30 days. And Councilmember Schaefer offered to assist with oral board interviews, which is great because it is a very big time investment. So appreciate that. Discuss the challenges of hiring police officers right now and selecting the right candidates for our agency and community. But that's all moving along and rolling along. I think the selection for officers and things is being reviewed in such a high level because of how important it is to be the right fit for our community. And then there was a discussion in regards to another proposal, but Lieutenant Saburn is working on some more information on that. So he'll bring that back to the committee at a later date. And that's all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Naplin has a question.
Sure.
You mentioned you discussed the difficulty to find candidates.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, let me try to get the volume up. I'm on this little phone.
You mentioned that you had a discussion about the difficulty of finding a candidate. And I remember at one point, part of the challenge was there was not enough room in the training academies, and there was hopefulness that the state would do something about it. I think it was the state. And I'm just wondering, do you see or maybe this is a question for Acting Chief DeBach, if there's any hope for that in the future to get better. It just seems like an ongoing challenge.
I think I'll pass that on to Acting Chief DeBach. I will just say from my experience, just reviewing so many folks, I think for Duval, what we want is very specific, and we're a community, so there's some of that you're looking for, I think, in a candidate, and I think DeBach could tell you better.
Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Yes, to answer your question, Councilor Naplin, the Academy is back in session. They do have several classes set up for the next several months. So they are trying to get back to obviously operation as normal, but with the restrictions, they have limited class sizes and limited classes that are going to be available to our officers. So we do have a potential opening in the June Academy, which starts June 2nd. We applied for that this week, so we're waiting for a response from the BLIA to make sure we get that spot. So we should have some answer from them, and I would assume in the next week or two, whether or not we got that spot. But yeah, just to echo what Councilmember Bernicki said is we definitely can't afford to not have the right fit for our agency right now, and especially with the way things are going across the country, we want to make sure we have someone that's going to be not only a fit for our agency, but for our community as well. And we want to make sure we're being cautious and making sure that is the right selection that's being made.
Thank you. And thanks to Councilmember Bernicki's report, I realized the big item that I didn't have on my list. And that is today we welcomed our newest officer, Fred Pa, to the force. I had the honor and privilege of swearing him in person this morning at the PD. First time I've been in the building in over a year. So that was quite strange. But thank you to the Public Safety Committees for attending that. And we're all very excited to have him on board. So if you see him out and about, please give him a Duval welcome. We're glad to have him, and I think he's going to be a fantastic fit for the city. All right, and Councilmember Schaefer?
Well, the question on the same topic, Mayor, I was going to ask you, has the recruitment of Officer Pa been in the works for a while? I was a little surprised to see the invite, to tell you the truth, of the swearing in ceremony.
Acting Chief DeBach, you can answer that timeline question.
Yes, Councilmember Schaefer, he was part of that initial selection process at the beginning of the year. I think it was the January, February oral boards. He was involved in that round. So he has been in the background for a while. I think it's been maybe 2 months now that he's been going through the background. And he comes to us from Bellevue Police Department. And prior to that, he has 11 years on with Honolulu PD. So we're very excited to have him on board. He comes with a lot of experience. He's was Honolulu's one of their top community officers. He's a bike patrol in Honolulu. So we're excited about having him here and getting his experience.
Yeah, that's great news for us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I have a habit of doing this now that still getting used to having committees on the agenda with formal reports. So I inadvertently skipped land use. So Chair McHenry, do you have anything to report?
Actually, that's me.
Oh,
Councilmember Hogue.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going on hour 13 today, so my apologies, guys.
So we did have 2 meetings since our last council meeting. We had one on March 24th and one on March 31st. And those in attendance were myself, Councilmember Langle, Councilmember Naplin, Acela Chavez, and Troy Davis. And on the 24th, Troy gave a really great presentation on our growth targets, and he had a great way of explaining the different phases that we've been through. And so I know his presentation is on the OneDrive, so if you want to check that out. And then Acela gave a really nice presentation about the temporary sign code updates. We're going to work on being in compliant with the 2015 Supreme Court case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert, which involves sign content. So I know Acela's been working very hard on that and comparing to other cities and what they've done so far. On the 31st, we had a presentation from Troy on Rio Vista Park Plan. And it was really a great presentation. A couple things that came up that we discussed during the meeting was the trails are, it seems like trails are something that are kind of inconsistent, that some of them are managed by the homeowners association and some of them are managed by the city. And I believe this one is going to be managed by the city. So that was kind of a topic of conversation. And then the other topic of conversation was the storm vaults, or the vault access that, that they've been putting in the play areas. And so we just kind of discussed maybe considering having policy around those vaults. They're very large risers. And so that's just something that we kind of discussed during that meeting. But that's it.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Chair Hoag? All right. Seeing none, now we move on to Public Works with Chair McHenry.
Thanks. So I covered our last Public Works Committee meeting notes at the last council meeting. So I have nothing new to report except that our next meeting is on April 14th.
All right, thank you. And we had kind of the ad hoc discussion in Committee of the Whole. So I will leave it up to the chairs of the Ethics Policy Committee and Human Services Grant Policy Committee to see if you wanted to reshare information or if you wanted to let it go. Councilmember Hoag?
I'd like to add a little bit, just to kind of update on what we discussed during the Committee of the Whole. We, especially since Councilmember Brudnicki wasn't at the meeting, but so we've decided to, I guess, change this ad hoc committee to council procedures. I guess it would be called City Council Procedures and Code of Conduct. And then we've elected, or we discussed having Councilmember Brudnicki on that committee. And I know you weren't there, so it might be a surprise to you, but they were all in favor of that. So she might want to comment on that. But it would be myself and Councilmember McHenry that would be working on council procedures and updates, since they haven't been updated since 2015. So that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Brudnicki.
Yeah, I'm happy happy to serve on your committee and help you with any information you might need to make good policy. So that's fine. Thank you for including me.
And Councilmember McHenry, did you want to add more or wait until the agenda item discussion?
We can just wait until the agenda item discussion.
Okay, great. Well, we will go ahead and move on to our first presentation. And this is one I'm excited, well, I should say mixed emotions. We're going to miss Chief Hurt quite a bit, but are super excited to have Acting Chief DeBach become our full-time police chief. And so he is here tonight to give a presentation, a high-level presentation on his transition.
Thank you, Mayor. You have to bear with me. It's my first time sharing a screen on Zoom, so I'm going to try to do this correctly.
It'll be the first of many.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right. So as the mayor has told you, and I'm sure you're all aware, we have a transition going on at the police department. So I'd like to take the opportunity tonight to share with you what that transition looks like, and along with our new mission and vision statement and our goals for the next 2 years. So as you're all aware, Chief Hurt will be on his final leave starting April 9th. So Friday will be his last day with our department. He's been here 17 years and it's well deserved, and he's definitely going to be missed by everyone, that's for sure. I'll be the acting chief from April 9th until Chief Hurt retires on June 30th. July 1st will be my projected promotion date as your new chief. Starting in April, we'll begin the transition to my leadership style and work towards our 2-year goals. So my leadership style is, I don't wait for someone else to do something because it's not my problem, and I will expect others to do the same. If I see something that needs to be fixed, I will do my best to engage others in potential solutions. We should all try to leave things better than when we found them. I will encourage others to take charge and make their own decisions. I will make mistakes, but that's how I learn and become better or stronger. It's not about failing or succeeding, it's about doing. I expect mistakes in others and value the learning opportunities that come with them. My strengths: I'm organized and neat. I will set up routines and focus on timelines and planning. I'm happiest being part of a team and will promote the team concept. Trust is very important to me. I have strong beliefs in enduring principles such as honor, courage, commitment, and discipline. I'm dependable and trustworthy, and I'm committed to a stable value such as honesty and loyalty. Vision and mission. So the first screen here is the Duvall's current mission statement. Address the growing needs and expectations of our community by providing fiscally responsible essential services through professionalism, creativity, integrity, and transparency, while embracing diversity, preserving our history, and enhancing the quality of life. In respect for the time that I've been given this evening, I'm not going to read this to its entirety, but as we developed our new mission and vision statement, we incorporated a lot of the principles that is listed here on the vision and part of the mission statement as well, to kind of get the PD to mirror what the city's vision and mission are. So our mission statement is: the mission of the Duval Police Department is to protect the rights, safety, and property of our citizens with integrity, preparedness, and positivity. By working in partnership with our community, we will strive to improve the quality of life for all who live and work here. Our vision statement: we are here to serve our community and are committed to providing them with a high level of service. We utilize the public resources effectively and are focused on long-term sustainability by being prepared. Our department thrives with transparency and teamwork through effective communication, active listening, and trust. We provide excellent customer service and build positive relationships with all members of our community. We provide our citizens with exemplary public safety and work with them to find solutions to the challenges they face. We present a professional appearance and perform our job with honor, courage, and commitment. We display personal integrity and hold each other accountable for our work and the perception of our community. Our core values are integrity, doing what's right even when no one's watching; preparedness, being ready for the challenges that will come. As you're all aware, law enforcement is going to be seeing some drastic changes over the coming months and years, so we need to be prepared for that. Everyone's a leader and will be expected to perform the job of the person above and below them. That's something I've learned as far as from my military background, and I want to bring that to the PD as well. So anytime we have an absence in our staffing, somebody else can step up and fill that place or that absence. Positivity, we'll celebrate each other's strengths and accomplishments. And like I said earlier at the COW meeting when we did the officer presentation, that's one of the things I want to start doing going forward, start recognizing those strengths and accomplishments in our people and everyone around us. So 2021, we're going to see a change in our organizational chart. For the past 2 years, we've been working on our succession plan where we've had 2 lieutenants, both overseeing the operational side of the police department and the administration side of the police department. As I step into the role of the chief, that'll leave Lieutenant Sabrin to oversee both operations and administration. So there will be no need for 2 lieutenants anymore. So I'll show you what the chart looks like. At the top, of course, we have the mayor and our interim city administrator. I do have Mr. Cotton starting in April as listed below Ms. Thomas. Then myself, and then as I talk to you about Lieutenant Sabrin is going to be overall seeing the operational side administration, which on our administrative side, we just have our public records, our records manager, Shelley Rowe. Steve also oversees, or Lieutenant Sabrin also oversees our training, both in the department and with the city. So under that, you have field training, the DARE program, our mentorship program, and then also our reserve officer program, which we currently only have 1 reserve officer, which is Reserve Officer Reef. He's very, he's been a big help for us, especially during the pandemic, coming in and filling out and helping with shifts and taking reports and doing all kinds of various tasks during this pandemic. And then on the operational side, we still have our 2 patrol sergeants, and then each of them have 4 officers that they're responsible for. As you know, there's 3 open positions. Actually, one's The one in the middle to the left, right there is Officer Pa, who was sworn in this morning. And as the mayor told you all earlier, we really appreciate everyone that's able to attend today, and we're glad to have on board. We've been running kind of thin for a while now, so having the extra help is very well needed. The school resource officer is currently empty only because we're not in school right now. As we transition back this week, I think they're starting classes, so we'll have the day shift officers filling those responsibilities. We did advertise for that position after we lost Officer Quat to another agency. We had one officer, Rhodes, who put in for that position, and he will assume that position starting next school year. So he'll be the full-time SRO up there, which will open up his spot, and his FT is actually the chief's position. So that will need to be filled as well in the future. And then we have one officer who we just sent his letter to this morning, who made it through our background. He is an entry-level officer, and he will be going to the academy, or should be going to the academy in June, as long as everything goes well with his selection day with the academy and his physical fitness test, which will be later this month. Priorities and goals. A lot of these priorities and goals that I got from for the next 2 years are from my meetings with you over the summer. I did appreciate our time we spent together, and I took a lot of that stuff to heart, and I want to make some of those our priorities and goals moving forward, and hopefully we'll be able to accomplish majority of them, if not all of them. I know I've bitten off a lot here, so hopefully in the next 2 years we're going to be able to accomplish a majority of these. Well, I appreciate and understand that our law enforcement profession is ever evolving, requiring changes in our goals and priorities. The following will provide a strong basis for our department moving forward. We're going to enhance our social media footprint and increase the amount of PSA videos. We're going to come up with new ways to engage our citizens through COP programs. We're going to develop and send out public survey regarding the police department and determine the wants and needs of the public by the police. We're going to establish a strong recruiting and mentorship program. We're going to look for ways to address diversity in the community and recruit with the purpose of our department being a mirror of the people we serve. We're going to have accountability at all levels and address issues at the lowest level. We're going to establish an early warning system which will allow supervisors to acknowledge a problem with employees and work with them to address the problem and prevent them from reoccurring. We're going to promote effective communication and active listening. We're going to continue to build trust and empower others. No one should be afraid to take risks. We're going to look for positive results and acknowledge them. We're going to develop decision makers and leaders in all employees. We're going to improve the quality of life at the police department. Some of that stuff that we're planning on doing is replacing the flooring, the HVAC system. We're going to paint and possibly get some windows that open. Currently, there's no windows at the police department that actually open. So it'd be nice to have some fresh air every once in a while in there. And then we're also going to begin the process of going paperless. And the mayor kind of addressed that earlier during her report, how we're looking at options throughout the city. And there's a lot of stuff at the police department that we can do and other agencies are already doing as far as our evidence logging and our police reports and our reporting systems and the different files and forms that we have. So I'm working with Records Manager Rowe to come up with ways and look at different options for us. We have a ton of filing cabinets and boxes and everything at the police department, just full of paperwork that we can put, electronically on the cloud or some other storage base and get rid of all that extra space down there, or get rid of all that space down there. And we're going to increase retention by making Duval Police Department the place to be, by establishing a culture that's fun to work in. And we're going to continue to be fiscally responsible and become better prepared for our future wants and needs. That is all I have. I will provide you all with a copy of this presentation so you have it. And then if you have questions or current concerns or comments, feel free to reach out to me at any time and I can address those with you.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Acting Chief DeBach? All right. I think we're just all excited.
Me too.
I can see Councilmember Lingle on a couple of items that we're in sync with that she's really excited about as well. So thank you, Acting Chief DeBach. Next up, we do have a public hearing for a resolution on our semi-annual surplus. So with that, I will open the public hearing and Mr. Lenishevsky, please take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. Let me flip the screens here. You know, just when you get used to using one tool, you're on 3 different video platforms a day, and you're like, where the heck is the button on this one? Because it's not there as it was on the other one. So anyway, so we have shouldn't take long. It's a public hearing for annual surplus. Again, RCW requires this when there are funds that are from the utility, and we do have funds commingled in a lot of the things that we do purchase, as most staff are funded by many, many departments. So with that said, the bulk of the items are office related and several bits of equipment. Larger pieces to point out would be the 2013 Police Dodge Charger, a 1992 Ford 5-yard dump truck, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 generator sets out of surplus wastewater treatment plant lift stations that were scattered throughout the city that we have removed. And we did try to actually use some of those or one of those at our shop. But again, Old Town, if you aren't aware, is single phase. These are 3-phase systems. So it's not that they can't work. There's just some pretty decent cost to get it to work. And having a tow behind generator for the shop, we really don't need to spend an inordinate amount of money to get power there. So we looked into some things to reuse, and we did not come to conclusions of such. The old dump truck, for those interested, is at the wastewater treatment plant. It was used in times of need to haul biosolids prior to my arrival here, and in the first couple of years in the early 2000s, the city actually hauled its biosolids away and then hauled them down to Kent. So Dave would make that trip 2 to 3 times a week. It just became too much with too few staff, and then when more people coming, we continued to make too much biosolids to handle. So all in all, monitors are 4:3 ratios, 10 years old. They're nothing to write home about, and they may be so old that the prior chief to Hurt may have bought them from Redmond on their surplus. So there you go. We tried to make notes to make this clear and common for folks when we talk about where the funds go when we're done with the surplus process. And that's all I really have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Laniszewski. And we have 2 attendees on the phone. And so if the clerk can please elevate them to panelists, you do have an opportunity to provide public comment if you so wish.
They have both been allowed to talk, so they can unmute themselves at any time if they wish to do so.
All right. I'm not seeing any microphones go off of mute. So with that, I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will move on to new business, Agenda Bill 21-32A, resolution for semi-annual surplus. And this is our discussion time. Mr. Laniszewski.
Thank you all again. I just looked in my camera, and I'm sorry. I have a giant 1 and 6 balloons for our middle who turned 16. Sorry, didn't even realize that. My wife's up on a video herself tonight doing the training. So the item that we spoke about, I don't know if council had any questions. There's quite a list of items, and I know people haven't been to City Hall lately, but City Hall's been trying to organize. We have very little space. We're trying to put people anywhere we can. So Jody and the group at City Hall have filled the conference room with yard sale materials. The shop is full with other things, and we're just trying to, I don't know. It's amazing. I thought we just did this, a few months ago, but there are a lot of office things in this go round. And I can reshare my screen if you so like. Button go again. It's a big green one in the middle. Try to do tabular format for office supplies. Try to include some photos for equipment. Again, I can speak to the truck. I know the acting chief is here. He could speak to the charger if you had questions. Again, tried to be clear on where the materials that were billed from originally get put back when we get into coding of surplus items. Are there any questions from the council tonight?
Mayor Pro Tem Remington and then Councilmember Langle.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, on the cow, one of our packet items included exception from the police. How is that incorporated? Is that something coming to us later, separate from this, or are we going to try to incorporate those together?
No, they'll be separate, and I believe those are munitions for the most part. So in general, we would prefer not to have anything to do with handling of munitions. We'll let police do that on their own. So those are going to be completely separate, which is fine. We can run as many surplus items on an annual basis as we choose. We just try to do it efficiently at once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm. We realized we didn't want some of those items in the hands of public, and there are already some reasons that you don't want to pass those on just to anybody. And again, I realize that will now be separate. Is there an opportunity to, in our policy, surplus policy, not just to destroy those, but if there's another department that could use those for training at a gun range, for an example, is there an opportunity for that?
I would imagine so. I think attorneys on, as well as acting chief, and it's easier to see you all this way. I don't know, Mike, if you want to jump in. I know some munitions were old, some were for what we don't have, and I think donation policy is probably Mr. Kenny's bailiwick, and I think you could create a donation policy should you choose to. But I think most of the stuff is shotgun based, and we don't do shotguns anymore. So maybe Mike, then Danny.
So that is correct. What we have is approximately 2,500 shotgun rounds in our armory. It's taking up about 2.5 shelves worth of our armory space down there. 3 years ago, we began the transition from lethal shotguns to less lethal option. So we really don't have the need to have that many shotgun shells on hand. So we're trying to basically free up some space in the armory so we can store some additional equipment in there.
Is there a opportunity, Chief, to see if there's another police agency that could use those for training purposes at a range?
I know Chief Hurt and one of our officers that's in charge of the armory was reaching out to different agencies. A lot of the departments aren't even using them anymore as well. And they are a few years old now. So we had contacted our source where we get them from, and they were just going to give us basically pennies on the dollar for these rounds to get back. So we're looking at other options.
Okay, well, thank you.
Great. I think we had Councilmember Langle and then Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, maybe this is a question also really for Dana related to this. Once we get this all surplus, I mean, I know it goes back to the individual departments, but can we get some kind of a, maybe even it's through just the finance committee, the amount of money that we derive from the surplus, just in total, so we know how that compared to what you actually budgeted for surplusing this year?
Yes, and I don't believe we normally, or at least this year, we didn't budget for a lot of surplus revenue. If we budgeted any at all, because you just really don't know what you're going to receive. So
right.
We would if there's enough, we would just do a mid-biennium budget adjustment to add that revenue in. But it definitely goes into a separate line item for each fund. So we'll be able to pull that out and see exactly how much we receive.
That would be great, because I'm trying to track all these little nuances as we go through the year and we make really great decisions. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Let's see, to help address Council Members Lingle's question and Acting Chief DeBach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the current plan is to actually, because of liability concerns, to actually sell these additional rounds to our own police officers. And somewhere today, I actually saw we got a estimate of what at least on the average each round was worth. And I think it was on the order of 18 cents per round. So the total amount of revenue we get from this is probably going to be in the hundreds of dollars, not anything to get too excited about. Did I capture that right, Acting Chief DeBock?
You did, that's correct. So with the ammunition or firearms, we'd have to do complete background checks on anyone who would bid or want to purchase those items. To save time and resources, we are requesting, permission to actually sell to our officers. We already obviously have background checks done on each officer that is employed with us. So that would save the time. And yeah, it would only be a couple $100 that we would get from these rounds. They are approximately 18 cents a piece is what they have prescribed them being worth. So we would hope to be able to use that money towards purchasing additional 9mm ammunition, which is what our officers carry for duty. So that would be the hopes.
Thank you. Any more questions regarding police surplus or public works surplus? Okay. With that, is council okay with putting surplus on the consent agenda at the next meeting? Okay, great. We'll do that. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on to Agenda Bill 21-33A, Resolution for Human Services Grant Policy and Application for Discussion and Decision. For the public's information before we get into this, there was a robust discussion during Committee of the Whole. Council had some minor suggested changes that Director Mason was plugging into the policy, and we'll need amendments to move those forward this evening, and I will let Councilmember McHenry take this on.
Thank you. So if everyone's okay with it, I was not going to share the document again. Is that okay? That we can just kind of move on. We talked about this a lot in the Committee of the Whole. I haven't seen any replies on the email with the suggested language for the amendment, which is adding under organizations eligible for human services funding section to just add a sentence that says staff will independently verify each organization's nonprofit status. And then under the timeline section, removing for funding on even years section. So, and removing the words on odd years. So basically just making it a more simplified timeline for grant submission, application submissions. So was there any more discussion, I guess, on this, or any other thoughts? Is council all in agreement on that amendment, I suppose, or any other suggested tweaks? I guess just open the floor.
I think everybody's good with it. And so with that, if I know that Councilmember McHenry is hoping to get this approved this evening, so we would need to suspend our rules. And so I would be happy to entertain a motion to that.
I move go ahead.
Oh, I can do it. You can do it.
I move we suspend our rules.
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion by Councilmember McHenry, a second by Councilmember Lengel to suspend the council procedures in order to vote on the ordinance this evening. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. So next, what we need is a motion on the original ordinance plus the amendment before we can get to final passage.
So
Just to clarify, Mayor, it's a resolution, not an ordinance. So just,
yes, thank you.
So is that all in one motion then? Is that what you're saying?
no, you would have to move to approve the resolution to begin with, and then you would move to amend the policy, the exhibit, like I said in that email.
Okay.
All right, so do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'm happy to make the motion, Mike Remington.
All right,
I move that council approve Agenda Bill 21-33A resolution, Human Services Grant Policy and Application.
Second.
great. We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Remington and a second by Councilmember McHenry to approve the Human Services Grant Policy resolution. And now would be the appropriate time for amendment.
I move we amend Exhibit A as follows. Under organizations eligible for human services funding section, add the following sentence to section D. Staff will independently verify each organization's nonprofit status. And under timeline section, remove for funding on even years section in whole and remove the words on odd years.
Mike Remington, I second the amendment.
All right, we have a motion to amend by Councilmember McHenry, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Remington. Does council want to have any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, all those in favor of the resolution as amended, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Thank you. And now we will move on to our next agenda item. Agenda Bill 21-34A, authorize expenditure for compensation study for discussion and or decision. This is a first touch, so it would require a suspension of the rules. Ms. Mason, our finance director.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Dana Mason, Finance Director. So as you know, the city had an agreement with the Teamsters that included the from their 2018 to 20 contract that included a compensation study done by the city by June 30th, 2020. The city issued an RFP and a consultant was selected for the compensation study that included all city employees. The consultant, due to the pandemic, was unable to gather the information via their usual methods, wasn't very technical savvy or technologically savvy. And so the contract was terminated in March of 2021. So the compensation study for the Teamsters employees is still needed. The cost is unbudgeted in the 21-22 budget, and the estimated costs are about $20,000 to $25,000, but may run higher depending on availability due to the pandemic. So staff is authorizing or asking council to authorize up to $40,000 for a compensation study, and would also like to know if council does want to include the non-represented employees in the study.
Councilmember Naplin, McHenry, and then Schaefer.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the process here. Is there a reason why we're authorizing a larger amount before we've even received any responses to our proposals? I'm not really sure if we think I mean, are we sort of doing a budget amendment? I'm just trying to understand why we would formally need to authorize a larger amount at this point, because any contract award would come to council.
That's I guess maybe the question then is authorizing the city to go out for a request for proposals for a compensation study that could cost up to $40,000.
Okay, we're not authorizing $40,000 to spend.
No.
We're just authorizing the RFP to go out. Okay, I was sorry, I was confused about exactly what we were being asked. So my second question is, our previous consultant had gathered, I assume, some information. Was that acquired in a way that could give some kind of leg up to the next person? So
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Yes, and we would definitely give whatever consultant was hired that information so hopefully they could use it, and it may be less expensive, but it also depends on what cities are selected for the study. If it's exactly the same, if they come up with exactly the same cities, it could save quite a bit of money.
So I see what you're saying. really going back to square one, that there would be an analysis of which cities are comparables, which I think is great. But I hadn't really thought through that that would be a part of it, but it could mean they need to gather more information. So yeah, I am in support of going forward with this, especially since we aren't authorizing $40,000 necessarily right at this moment.
Thank you, Councilmember Naplin. Councilmember McHenry? And I do see your hand, Councilmember Councilmember Lingle. So after Councilmember Schaefer will be your turn.
Thanks. So I guess my first thought was I was hoping or expecting to anticipate a lower price potentially because of travel times wouldn't be there. Like it seemed like before, travel can be a big part of those estimates. So is that something that you've heard? Is the availability is causing prices to go up, or could we be pleasantly surprised and they're lower?
We might be pleasantly surprised and they could be lower. The initial proposals that the city received, the highest cost was $60,000. And then that we had also had one for $37,000. So we went with the one that was quite a bit lower than the $37,000 one. The consultant had great recommendations. His background checked out and everything, but he did not, just was unable to do the work because of the pandemic. So
Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Schaefer, and then Lingle, and then Naplin.
Let's see, so we did ask, or you did ask, Director, if we wanted to include non-represented employees. Do you know at this point in time that would increase the cost, or you think that would just be in the noise, or any idea of that?
So the cost, the anticipated cost would include non-represented employees if council chose to go that direction.
Okay, yeah, and
Hopefully.
I personally would like to see that as well. I mean, we, represented or not, we want to pay our employees a fair price so we can, retain them for one thing, and make them happy for another. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lingle.
Just to quickly, I reiterate that point. I mean, our corporate values, government can have corporate values, is that we treat people the same. And so we really need to include non-represented employees. I would also agree with Councilmember Naplin. We're not approving a contract here. The one piece of this that to share is, I recall when this RFP was originally issued, and I had a discussion with Assistant or Deputy City Administrator Thomas around my concern that we make sure this be all encompassing. And she felt like, the other consultant would work out. COVID just obliterated that, right? So the one piece that's outstanding in this discussion is the workflow analysis. And I think I just want to make sure I highlight that, because that is another piece of what we're trying to achieve. And it doesn't sound like, at least at this point, it would be part of this new RFP. But maybe we want to think about that, because in the original RFP, all of these things were wrapped together, and they truly are interrelated at some point. So if we agree on redoing the salary study, then we have to remember that that other piece is unresolved.
Yes.
So that's just really a comment. It's not a negative about proceeding on this level. I guess one last thing I would say is, perhaps not surprisingly, I'm tracking every time we save money. And I would really like to see, when this comes forward, how we are potentially looking at savings under budget authority to address this additional expense. And it's because we really do, we've been doing a really good job, I think, of looking for, not just salary, but other kinds of savings. And I think that's great. And we should take a look there before we appropriate more money. A budget amendment does not mean increasing budget authority, I guess is my point.
And to address your point, council member, about the workload analysis, that's on the interim city administrator task list, and that's between municipal financial consultant personnel. And those are the 3 of the top items that we're going to have him work on. So that's not being forgotten. It's a critical component for the long-term planning side. So thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I do support doing all employees, including non-represented. I think that most municipal advisors don't go out and do that study, but if we have the information, it'll help them with the important calculation of how wages and benefits calculate into our long-term financial plans. I do have a question. We talked about the potential cost of this running up to $40,000 and that being unbudgeted. Do we know where that would come from in the budget when we get to a point of authorizing those funds?
So it would be allocated amongst all of the funds by FTE that's included in the study.
So we wouldn't need to take something else away from that's been, I just want to confirm we're not removing something else from the budget, that we do have budget capacity to be able to pay for this at this point.
We do. We could use fund balance if there wasn't something in the budget that we could take away. We do have sufficient fund balance to use if needed. And so we could do it that way, but it will be spread amongst all of the others funds, the utility funds included, as part of the overhead allocation.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And it sounds like there's consensus. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Hoag.
I just had one quick question. So the previous person that we hired for this study, did he get fully paid?
No.
Okay. I'm sure maybe partially paid.
He did get paid a substantial part of his contract, but he did not get fully paid.
All right, Councilmember Napling.
So I didn't specify that I also am in favor for doing the represented and non-represented. And so I just want to share that. And then I was glad that Director Mason brought up, well, she mentioned the proposals, the amounts that they were those amounts including the workflow analysis when you said 60-something thousand, or was that?
So that was not, because in our initial RFP, we did not put in the workflow analysis, and then we added it after the fact. So the original proposals did not include it.
Okay, are we using the same method to try to solicit for this? Do we have any ideas to reach a broader audience, or do you think it'll probably be about the same?
So I think we received 4 or 5 proposals last time, which is a good amount for that kind of study. But we can, I know of a few cities that have had recent salary studies and have been really happy with them. So I'll make sure that the proposal gets to them as well. The request for proposals gets to those consultants.
Okay, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
This is a bit of an odd question, might be an attorney question for Daniel. So we're going back out to RFP, and the company that we decided not to work with could put in for it again. I'm just wondering if we need to take any action. It seems practical that they likely would not put in, because there was a bit of a souring on how that study was done. But I'm just wondering if there's anything we need to do on our side to eliminate that company, even if they should put in.
So I'll jump in on that. Yeah, I mean, I think you can write into the RFP qualifications that we know were a struggle. It's a, you know, qualified respondent would need to meet those. You could also use that as a reason not to select somebody, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? So it sounds like we already have consensus. I know this is a first touch, but if council chooses to get this off of the work plate now, I would be happy to entertain a motion to suspend the rules. Councilmember Lingle.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
Mike Remington, second.
Great. We have a motion by Councilmember Lingle, a second by Councilmember Remington to suspend the rules. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes, and I'd be happy to entertain a motion on the underlying agenda bill.
Mike Remington, I think there was discussion about clarifying exactly what we were doing here. This says authorize expenditure for compensation study. I think what we were looking at would be approving Agenda Bill 21-34A, authorizing the city to release a RFP or RFQ for the compensation study.
Correct.
And then
That's
we can later point.
much better way to phrase it.
And then returning at a later point, of course, to have authorization from council. I don't know if that's language is sounds like it's okay, but so I would move that we authorize that.
Great, thank you. Is there a second, Councilmember Schaefer? Are you the second council member?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 21-35A, Resolution for the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 policy. And I will let actually Ms. Mason, I didn't realize this had my name on it, Ms. Mason carry the weight here. In general, we had the original policy for emergency sick leave that was covered under the original CARES Act in 2020. That expired at the end of December. We didn't know when Congress was going to act. And so we extended the policy for our employees to make sure that if they got sick from COVID, that there was time available for them, or if they had issues with their vaccines. That policy did expire on the 31st, and the ARPA is now officially in place, and that offers emergency sick leave to folks in all COVID situations, including those that have adverse reactions to the vaccines. So I will let Dana take it away with the details, but essentially this is not much more than an extension of what we've already been doing.
Hoping everyone can see this. So really it is very similar to the Families First Coronavirus Act, whereas employees would get 80 hours of sick leave for COVID related illness, vaccine, or vaccination or illness related to the vaccination. There's a $511 per day cap is to be used for the employee. And if the employee has to take the sick leave to care for another family member, there's a $200 per day cap for that. And then the emergency family leave is actually eligible. An employee would be eligible after 30 days of employment. And also, so this is good for a new employee who just started with the city and may not be eligible for the Washington State paid family medical leave, which is you're not eligible until you've worked a certain number of hours. I think it's 820. This is capped at 2/3 of the employee's wage, or $200 per day. And then it could be taken, used to care for self or an immediate family member. I think that's the only slide I had for that one.
And before we start discussion, I do want to let folks know that I believe over 50% of our employees have been vaccinated already. So this really covers those that haven't been vaccinated. And again, we had somebody just within the last week that kind of fit that gap time. And so moving this forward a little more essential, especially as the vaccines have opened up. Do we have questions or feedback? Councilmember Lingle?
Yeah, when I look at this, which goes to September, wait, I better go to my notes. September 30. My reaction was that, the president has opened this up. I think it's April the 19th.
Mhm.
And we've already done very well on vaccinations. And do we really need to open this up as long as September? And I guess part of that is, I do hope people will get vaccinated, or they will be very, very diligent around wearing their masks. And so the one hesitancy I have here is making it that long into September.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Councilmember, Councilmember Naplet?
If you are responding to Councilmember Lingle, I can wait.
Yeah, it was just simple. I think my suspicion is with the federal side, the September date was probably meant to cover kids as well, because a parent may need to take time off for their teenager who has a bad reaction, and that they do know that those younger folks are having stronger reactions. So that would be my suspicion as to why they did that. Because you've got the family side of it as well.
Okay.
I'm not saying
Thank you.
Yeah, just point of information.
That's helpful.
Great. Anyone else? Councilmember Lingle, I'm definitely losing my speech tonight. It's been a long one. Councilmember Naplet.
Thank you. So I had a couple questions about how this would coordinate with existing leave balances. And I sort of asked this question at the meeting. So the first question would be, is there any coordination or topping off in, for example, where 2/3 of the pay, I think it was, or there was a dollar amount? Is there any coordination to where, they could use 5 hours of sick leave to make themselves whole for partial pay? Or I didn't see it in there, but I thought, it refers back to another policy. So I'm not sure if inadvertently we are approving that because another policy allows it. It was sort of unclear. Do you remember what I'm talking about, Dana? How we have that?
I think you're talking about oh gosh. We did have another policy where the employee could take, I think you're talking about not the paid family medical leave policy, where an employee can take the state paid family medical leave and they can top it off because it is also capped at a lower amount. And then they can top it off with their own vacation or sick leave. Yeah. But there is not a provision. I don't believe there's provision for that in here.
Okay. And then is there anything in the policy that says, if you have hundreds and hundreds of hours of sick leave, so much that you're cashing out each year, that you would have to use any of that before you immediately get this extra leave? Or do you just immediately go to this other leave, even if you have huge balances?
There is not anything in the policy that says that.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to ask that. One other thing, I certainly want to make sure our employees have an ability to take leave. And to receive pay during that time. We wouldn't want anyone to come to work sick because they were worried they needed to, put food on the table. So I just want to say that. But one thing that's interesting is I called MRSC and they didn't know of any other city putting this policy in at this point. It's voluntary. So I hadn't, maybe the mayor has heard of other cities implementing this. I'm not really sure, but I certainly want to provide an option for employees so that they would have access to sick leave. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, I have not heard of anybody specifically, but one thing I can say as a point of perspective is that our city's small, so the larger jurisdictions definitely have much more emergency sick leave pool that is shared leave that folks can donate to others. So their pools are much bigger than ours. So there's one factor there that might be why a larger jurisdiction may not be directly addressing it. But the good news here is that most of this, if we do have to use that leave, we should be able to recover those city costs from the ARPA funds if we choose to. So now that funding has gone into place, that provides that reimbursement to the city. So that's a positive to this policy. Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
Thank you, Mayor. To follow up on some of the conversation with previous council members, I'd love to find a way to encourage folks to get the vaccine. It's not required, so I have no interest in saying employees are required to get it. But if an employee chooses not to get it, gets sick, and then uses this, and I'm talking off the top of my head, so it may sound odd, but I could say I'd fully support this for employees up to the end of June. It gives them 3 months to get the vaccine and be protected, with the caveat that if they have children who are not eligible for vaccines by CDC, that we could continue that coverage for them to care for their children through September. So that was one thought, and I'd love to hear from other council members, or if that's even possible for us to do, and then how would we word that? The other part that was discussed here was sellback. It does seem odd that we'd provide a benefit where they didn't have to use their sick leave, but they have enough sick leave at the end of the year to say, oh, I'm going to cash it out. So another idea I have is that if we do provide this, an employee uses this, that their cash out ability would be reduced by the amount of this benefit that they used. So it's not just, hey, I can, make money at the end. The idea is not to profit from it, but to be able to, we're trying to support our employees so that they, aren't adversely affected. We've been helping citizens and businesses. We absolutely want to help our own employees. So I'm fully supportive of this, but these nuances, I think, take some discussion, and I'd love to hear from others. I'm just throwing this out as a topic.
I'm sorry, Councilmember McHenry and then Langle. And then I think we should have Mr. Kenny answer some questions because there's collective bargaining connected to this as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Council Members Naplin and Mayor Pro Tem Remington for their thoughtful comments, and I agree with much of it. And I was curious about some of those things too. I think that, if we end up looking at something in the lines of what Mayor Pro Tem just mentioned about if people have children, obviously that vaccination rollout is going to be much slower. I would just say, rather than just children, any household members who maybe haven't had a chance to get vaccinated. Sometimes you have multi-generational households with lots of people that living in one place. So I would just look for a little more broad language to describe different situations.
Councilmember Langle.
Yeah, I would say that one of the reasons I really like Councilmember Remington's comments is that we know as of today, our president has said, as of the 19th, let's open it up. And children really are the exception. They're in this, we don't really have studies to clarify, what we can do to help them. And so what I really, really like is the way he's described it. And I think that's a really good way to go if we can do it that way.
Thank you.
That's it.
Mr. Kenny, would you be comfortable weighing in on some of these topics that have been brought up and whether or not, what that process would look like?
Well, technically, I think the answer to your question is no, just because you have both my colleague Karen doing employment law and then your labor attorney, but you're right, Mayor, that this is going to touch on both those topics and I would want their input. I think my spidey sense, if you will, or red flags went up on both of the things that Mayor Pro Tem Remington identified. Not that I don't think that they could happen. I don't know that. But certainly, I think both of them could be very challenging when you've got represented employees, and depending on if they have children or if they've chosen to have a shot, you'd have different benefits being applied. And then the buyout options at the end of the year being different if you get sick and whatnot. I would just want to make sure that we vet those. I've written those down, and so we can flesh those out with either one of those attorneys as appropriate.
Councilmember McHenry?
Just to follow up on that for a little clarification, and I understand the answer may still be the same, that you need to follow up, but if it was just simply you have to use existing sick time and the extra sick time is in case, you were to get ill and need that extended, for prolonged illness. I mean, as something as simple as that with no specifications on who's in your household or if you've gotten a vaccine. I mean, is that an acceptable thing to put in?
So again, I apologize. I did not work on this one, so I'd have to, that one would be one for Karen, and I could ask her that tomorrow.
Thanks.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Well, as you, Mayor, and as you, Mr. Kenny, just mentioned, I think it's important that we treat our representative and non-represented employees equitably, not only to stay out of trouble with the unions, but really just to have the same treatment. So, our response to this may be dictated, by the unions, for everyone. Now, if by some chance we feel or we think we should go above and beyond what they want, that's a little bit of a different discussion then. But I think first we need to understand what what the union expects or what the union requires on this.
So Ms. Mason did run this through both collective bargaining units before it made it to the agenda as per legal advice.
And Director, was there anything, the factors that Mayor Pro Tem Remington mentioned, was there anything in there that would suggest that wouldn't be acceptable or would be acceptable to the unions?
No, I mean, I sent them to the policy as is, and they both replied back that it was fine. They were on board. So they didn't give any other feedback than that.
We would need to run this by them again then.
We would.
Yes, and our existing policy expired March 31st.
Yeah, and I know we're looking for some extension now tonight. Is that right? So
that's the hope. New questions have been raised and new ideas have been raised that hadn't been raised before, and that's fine. But I also want to remind folks that we don't have a way to estimate how much of this will actually be used. I know that very little was used within the last several months, that it's been a very small amount. So I would recommend that the council also weigh the per hour cost of having multiple attorneys involved in the policy versus the benefit. And is it worth that cost ratio to you, because it could be, it's very possible that the cost of continuing to amend the policy could exceed what we actually end up spend on supporting the employees. Not a guarantee, we don't know, but it's very, very possible. Councilmember Lingle.
When I looked at this, actually where I came down was not the fine points. It was really, do I want to go to September 30 or some more recent date or closer date? And so when I looked at it, I thought, you know, if we go to the end of the July, then that would give us, you know, we can obviously extend it beyond that. But maybe this is overly hopeful, but I really hope that people will get vaccinated, will keep following, you know, CDC recommended protocols, and that by the end of July, we'll still be able to be in phase 3, if nothing else. And so when I looked at it, the really important thing to me was, let's not go all the way to the end of September right now. Can we just go to the end of July? And, you know, if it looks like this wave 4 hits us, we extend it again. Just because there's, you know, and I know it's a small cost, but my concern is that if we open this philosophically, without true increments tied to our local achievements in King County, that maybe we're opening the door too large. So I could go with a policy if we just wasn't, you know, if we weren't going quite all the way to September.
Great. Thank you. Director Mason, and then we have not heard from Council members Brodnicki or Hoag.
Yeah, we can clarify this from the city attorney, but just looking at some of the language in the policy as it stands from the ARPA, the ARPA, it's kind of like an all or nothing policy. It may be, I mean, it still needs to be clarified, but it might be. So it's possible that the city will be eligible for a payroll tax for the amounts that it does pay out to cities. It's not 100% sure right now. It's not, you know, all the real rules haven't been fleshed out, but it doesn't exempt cities or governments like the FFRCA did or CRA did. So, I mean, we can definitely check with Karen Sutherland, but it looks like right now this is saying it's at this time, it's not clear whether employers can pick and choose what type of paid leaves they will provide. So, or it possibly even change the deadline. Just something to think about.
Great. Councilmember Hoag or Brodnicki, we haven't heard from either of you yet, so I'd like to make sure. Councilmember Brodnicki. It takes a while to get that unmute button on the phone.
Yeah, well, yeah, on the phone, it's hard. So first off, I'd like to stick, for me, I personally, philosophically, just want to stick with what's in front of us. We don't have a really large staff as compared to other cities. It's small and very manageable. So I am not as concerned about ideas of possibilities of what ifs, that sort of thing, because of the course of 14 years, I've always observed that the staff has been fair and have really done what is in the best interest of the city. So those kinds of concerns don't really come to mind for me so much. And I think in this case, you're talking about a pandemic, and when it first started, we didn't even know we're going to be this long into it. It's hard to put some sort of deadline, timeline to measure that. We don't know how that all turns out. We don't know who's going to get infected or who's going to get that vaccine and how that's all going to. And I just would like to do what is efficient and works best for everyone and is efficient. We're a small city, so the last thing I want to do is encumber the process and make it difficult and then cost us more money, as someone had mentioned earlier. So that's my opinion on that. And so I'm fine with moving forward as stated. And I'm really not worried about whether it's July or September, because I don't, what do we do then? Do we have to come back and meet and go through this process all over again, have this discussion for an additional 6 more weeks? Let's go with the deadline that has been stated. That's
Thank
it.
you, Councilmember. Councilmember Hope?
I really don't have a lot of input on this one, but I'm okay with proceeding with the way it's written personally, so.
Thank you, Councilmember. And then Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
Thank you, Mayor. Sometimes I throw out these thoughts and ideas just to open up discussion. There are times I think that they have merit, but I also agree. I said last time, this is the right thing to do for our employees. These are the folks doing the work for us. And I think it's a good message from our city council to say that we're here to support you. I think our citizens in general, if they were here, said, yeah, let's take care of our employees. There is a chance that we get reimbursed for some of this through the monies coming through. I think that's a huge decision factor. We're doing it for a lot of other folks that we don't know. Why don't we at least, take care of our own? So I'm okay as it's written here. I appreciate the thoughtful consideration and discussion from council members. Those are practical, real things, but sometimes those practical, real things get pretty complicated when you're talking about union negotiations, attorneys' opinions on it, having to delay a couple of weeks. And so personally, I'm okay moving forward as well.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? It feels like there's been a little bit of a shift here. So, I have to ask the question. It is a first touch. And so I need to ask if council wants to suspend their rules and move this forward this evening, or you want to wait a couple of more weeks. Councilmember Langle?
I move to suspend the rules.
Right. Do we have all right, we have a motion by Councilmember Langle, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Remington to suspend the rules. Any discussion? Councilmember Hoag?
No, I was just
in preparation. All right, thank you. All right, seeing no discussion, all those in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, would someone like to make a motion on the agenda bill? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Duval City Council approve Agenda Bill 21-35A, a resolution, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 policy.
Second, Brednicki.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem and a second by Councilmember Brednicki. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, before you take the vote, I just want to say thanks for the conversation. Some good practical ideas were brought up. And I think it's a fruitful discussion, especially if we end up needing to extend beyond September. And hopefully we'll have more advanced notice next time, which is what we keep wishing for every time we bring these policies forward. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I would rescind my request that we have a follow-up with City Attorney Daniel Kinney on those items.
Okay.
To be honest, I appreciate his offer to get those answers for us. But now that we've moved on, I think it's moot. And, maybe it's something internally they discuss and, so we're all educated sometime. But I don't think we need to spend the money or his time or bring it back to us. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Now we move on to our final and for me, most exciting piece of business tonight. Agenda Bill 21-36A, approved contract for interim city administrator. I sent you guys the near final version on Friday. And our attorney had one minor last minute change today. So that has been in your boxes. I hope you've all had a chance to review it. I just want to start before we start discussing this by saying that we had a really surprising, well-qualified pool of candidates. I was absolutely amazed at how many top-notch administrators applied for a part-time position. I think that's part of that is showing a shift in people getting closer to retirement time and wanting to continue their public service, but not necessarily at a full time. And doing what they can to help other jurisdictions as they prepare for retirement. And we narrowed it down to 4 candidates, interviewed 4, narrowed it down to 2, and that decision was very, very difficult between the 2. Both of them would have been excellent fits for the city. One of them, I think, would be probably better suited when the full-time position comes up, based on the long-term vision. And Mr. Cotton will come to us with 40 years experience. And as I said earlier, he's an adjunct professor as well. Just moved to Washington State within the last 2 weeks to be closer to family. And I think he's pretty excited about coming on board. And I know that he's definitely looking forward to working with council. He has worked in both in a strong mayor and a weak mayor form of government, so he's experienced with both. And can really help provide, I think, an outside experience perspective as we look at a lot of our big policies that we're looking to update and create this year, as well as position us very well for the recruitment of a full-time city administrator. So with that, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions on the contract. Councilmember Hoag.
So I too am excited about this, but you know me, I dig into contracts and I have 2 questions, I think mostly for Mr. Kenny, and then one suggested change if possible. But when I compared the 2 contracts that you sent us, it looked like the newest one changed to November 23rd and the old one said December 31st.
Yes. So point of clarification on that, in discussions with Mr. Cotton, his experience, he's done interim positions many times. And his experience during an election year is that by the time you get past that election, hopefully you're at the point of selecting that permanent city administrator, and that's a more appropriate time to exit. He also has family plans for the following month. So he wanted to make sure, in addition, that he wasn't committed to something that he couldn't commit to for that long of a time period.
My other question is under the compensation portion, there was a sentence that was removed. The very last sentence on the old one was removed. I was just curious why.
Yeah, I can answer that. There's a single sentence at the end of an RCW that says that appointive positions cannot be for limited term. And so that was one of the revisions that we made. It's expected to be limited duration. He understands that, but that provision, we won't ever get to an increase in pay. So we wanted to make that clear before, but because technically the position could get to that point, I decided to take that out. But it really has no practical impact on his pay.
So thank you. My third question has to do with the compensation. The very first sentence under compensation says the salary for the employee shall be $148,154. And I read this sentence many times, and I feel like it should specify that that 148,000 is the full-time employee price, because I know it says it's prorated, but it still doesn't, to me, is it not clear? I mean, it could be that I don't know. I just was hoping we could add some verbiage in there that said, like, the salary for this full-time position is $148,000. Instead of the salary, it says the salary for the employee shall be, I don't know. I'd love your input, Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think anything that would make it clearer, I mean, the intent is the same between what's written and what you're saying. So absolutely. I think you could add, after the first paren, so the salary for the employee shall be $148,154 paren and paren on a full-time basis, and then it'll go on to say prorated to reflect that the employee's regular work schedule is a half-time schedule. You could even add right there, after that, a paren that says what that prorated amount is, prorated to, 6,173 or whatever it is. So yeah, absolutely, that's very straightforward.
And just in case.
You're muted, Councilmember Hogue.
Oh.
We're talking about the same thing, so it's just, clarifying it, but thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Hogan, you did email me, and it is a little bit confusing, but and if we can just make that minor modification, if you'd be willing to propose that amendment, that would be great. And I did have some questions from folks too about what happens if we need him to work more than 20 hours a week. And we do have the budget for that. He's unsure that he could work more than 20 hours a week with other commitments, which is fine. But if we do get into a position where we all mutually agree that we need, and he's willing to go up to 25 a week for any portion of time, then we would come back to council with an amendment. So we do have the numbers have been run, and it looks like we've got plenty within our capacity. But even though he's an exempt employee, he's going to be sticking to that 20 hours a week. Some weeks will be 15, some will be 25, but on that average, 20 hours a week. Councilmember Naplin?
I think I should have taken a closer look at the version you sent today, because you had mentioned there weren't any substantive changes, but now I'm thinking, well, maybe my definition of substantive, because it sounds like the term has changed and some other things, and I know they seem minor. I'm just wondering if maybe Daniel could tell us what the changes were that I understood. It's just hard. If there's no red line, it's really impossible unless I line them up side by side or just completely re-go over the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can do that pretty quick. And I probably characterize them as minor, so I apologize if that's a mischaracterization, but the intent and the practical usage of the contract won't change. In section 3A, which is the term section. So if you jump to that, okay. So that did have an end date, but again, under state law, you can't have an end date. So we changed that to will remain in effect until terminated, essentially, and then added a sentence that says it's the expectation that it will end. So it's not that it is a contractual end date. It's just setting expectations. And the mayor can choose to do this however she wants, but on day 2 of employment, she could give notice of an end date, because it's an at-will employment. So that's why I said the practical reality is there's no difference. That end date will happen because that's what you want it to be. We just can't have a contract that has an end date in it. So that change, and then the compensation sentence in 4A that was taken out, there was a kind of a standalone sentence right following that paragraph that I took out because it talked about not getting a pay adjustment, like a cost of living adjustment, because technically if it did keep going, that would possibly be available. We were trying to preclude that, but again, we're never going to get to the point where that's ever going to pop up, so it just didn't become necessary. And so those were the only changes that I had put forward. It sounds like I think the date was modified slightly, if I recall, but I think that was it.
Okay, good. It's just Councilmember Hogue came up with a couple, and I thought, oh, I wonder if there's others that I hadn't noticed. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and that was me. I caught that, just that one sentence in state law. So I had to email the mayor today just to make sure that we caught that. So that was on me.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just wanted to also kind of point out that, in conversations with Ryan, we have negotiated kind of what his potential work schedule is going to look like, et cetera. So he just wanted to make sure council was aware that we had discussed that. There are some days that he will be taking and adjusting his weekly schedule for family reasons. And especially as an exempt employee, that's completely acceptable. And so I will be attaching that email that confirms our agreement to his contract in his employment file. But it's all really minor stuff that's, doesn't have any impact on his ability to carry out the task list. Mayor Pro Tem Remington?
A question and a comment. So at the end of the day, it's an hourly salary. So if he works 20 hours, he gets paid, because 50% of the full salary would be 74,000. How is it structured? I read through there. I get the intent of this, but are we actually in a practical way paying, in a set period, so much per hour? Do we know?
Daniel, you can answer that. I think it's when you're, even if you're a half-time employee, it's salary. So it's that weekly salary cut in half.
We're doing the salary. Okay, I get that. The comment I had was I had a chance to be on the interview panel for all 12 of the candidates. And I will say he is extremely impressive. And one of the things that impressed me most was a personal side. He moved here to be with his family. He is excited about that. He's got grandkids. And one of his comments was more important than the salary to him, because he said his comment was, I'll work it out for you. We'll work this out, because he said it's not about the money. But he said, I might need a Friday off to be with my grandkids at a special event now and then. That just completely endeared me. I get that. He is fully committed to be here and help us out, work out the money so it works for us. But his top priority was also his family. And I think it says a lot about his character, why he's here. I think that same commitment he has to his family, he'll have to the city of Duval family as well. Very impressed with him.
The only downfall I can see is that he wants to stay semi-retired. So at the end of this process, if we determine that he's the perfect person for us long-term, we won't be able to get him, but he'll help us find somebody just as good. Councilmember Langle?
I'd like to make a motion to approve AB 21-36A.
So we do need to suspend the rules first.
Okay, I'll suspend the rules.
Second, Mike Remington.
I'll make it let's move on.
All right, Councilmember Langle made the motion. Councilmember Remington seconded. Motion to suspend the rules. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Councilmember Langle.
I'd like to make a motion to approve AB 21-36A.
Second, Mike Remington.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Langle and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Remington. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Hoag.
So I'd like to,
you're right. I almost forgot. Thank you, Councilmember.
I'm actually not 100% sure. Mr. Kenny had the best words for changing that compensation portion. I think what he suggested was changing it to say the salary for the employee shall be.
Do you want me to share it on my screen and we can amend on the fly?
That'd be great.
Okay. Because I was a little confused as well. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, so my understanding is we're somewhere in this area. So Daniel, if you wouldn't mind helping me.
Yeah, so if you just go to line 2, right after withholdings and then end paren, you could just type there on a full-time basis. And then at the end of that sentence, you could add a paren.
Where's the end of the sentence? Sorry, I'm trying to find it. It's kind of a long one.
Yeah,
okay,
right
here we go. Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So prorated to reflect the employee's regular work salaries, a half-time schedule. And then, sorry, I'm just looking up what that ends up being.
Dana may know off the top of her head.
It's $74,077. Let me get the.
not doing?
Yeah, so I was thinking more the monthly,
The monthly,
but
61,000 or 6,173 per month.
Do you want me to add the minus applicable withholdings as well to this?
yes, please.
Not nerve wracking at all to be typing with everybody watching me or anything. Does that look good?
That's what I had proposed, but of course, open for any revisions from council.
I think that makes it a little more clear. So thank you for bringing that, Councilmember Hoag. Councilmember Lingle?
If that needs to be an amendment, that's fine with me. I just want to know what the projected savings is on that. Because when I looked at the numbers before, it looked like there was a little bit of savings compared to budget, the budget amount.
So if his contract starts April 16th and ends November 23rd at the latest, Dana, what number does that look like?
I'm going to stop sharing really quick, but I can pull it up if needed.
Dana, you're on mute.
It might be a little bit off because I had his contract, I believe, ending on the November 15th. So it is, yeah, so 8 months, 8.5 months. So it's $52,000, 471 in salaries, and then 11,635 in benefits. He may or may not opt to join PERS. So there may be savings there as well. But this amount does include the PERS.
So approximately 65,000 plus or minus, and we budgeted 104.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so I get to keep it on my list. Thank you.
All right, so council, whoever would like to make the formal motion for amendment, that would be fantastic.
I move that we amend the compensation section per Jody's help.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, all those in favor of the agenda bill as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And so as long as he hasn't changed his mind in the last 12 hours, we will have our new interim city administrator starting on April 16th. I can't stress enough how excited I am for you to meet him. He will be in town with Steve on the 13th just to get a little bit more of the lay of the land. And what we might do over the next month too is maybe on the days that he's in, schedule 3 council members at a time to have a properly social distance outdoor lunch for kind of a meet and greet. By then, I think most of us will have been eligible or have received our vaccines. So it makes it a little more safe as well, and make sure that we can follow the public health guidelines. So unless there are objections, we do not have any further business and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.